really got a great guest up next. We're going to have a series of presentations and then a panel discussion. And I'm really delighted to welcome Georgia Yexley. Really incredible history in micromobility rollout, international rollout, and we're delighted to have her with us. She is now the founder of Loud Mobility, turning her global experience and network towards delivering high impact and cross-sector projects with the aim of raising the volume of joyful, sustainable mobility. What a great phrase. And we asked Georgia for one thing that would surprise her colleagues. And it turns out that in the last year, she has developed a love for sporting challenges. She's completed 2 half marathons, 1 duathlon, and ridden from London to Brighton. Georgia, we're really glad to have you with us. And I know after your presentation, you're going to be participating in a panel. Over to you. I think you might be on mute.
Thank you so much for having me. And of course, I'm going to start on mute. You know, it's a typical thing to do. I've just got stupid amounts of tabs open, which is very me. So I'm just working through to get to my presentation here on my other screen. So thanks for bearing with me. Thanks for having me today. It was obviously a really, really nice introduction. I've thoroughly enjoyed listening to all of the rest of the speakers today. In particular, you know, really hard-hitting stuff, really important stuff that we've heard in the last presentation. And of course, I'm going to touch on the importance of planet and the fact that there is no planet B. It's one of the core values that we'll touch on today. But what I'm going to do is kind of come from an approach that is speaking more about mindset and how we get people to change their behavior. So I'm really not going to share anything groundbreaking. I don't think. I assume I'm not going to be telling you facts or data that you don't already know. But hopefully in kind of discussing and thinking collectively about this positive mindset and an approach that really seeks to increase positive outcomes as widely as possible, and built on top of the 4 key pillars and values that we've adopted at Loud and that I'll introduce today, can really lead to that individual influencing the system change that we so desperately need. So on to the next slide. On that note, a little bit more about Loud Mobility. It's a really young business. We've only been operating since the beginning of this year, but we've been fairly active, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the projects that we've been up to. But our vision is super simple. It's about system change, affecting the system change, which is, you know, light work, easy thing to do, but it is really a clear goal for us. We believe there's a better way to enable people to move in the UK and globally. To get there, you know, as it was introduced, our mission is really to raise the volume of joyful, sustainable journeys, raising the volume in the sense of widening participation, increasing the number of people that are enabled to access sustainable transport, but also in being vocal, being heard, being loud about it, being positive, and being able to move away from this idea that there's a loud minority that we're kind of railing against. And we don't need to do that from a perspective of, you know, for and against. And I'll talk a bit more about that today. So the path that we're taking to getting there is cross-sector collaboration. Through my career in micromobility, so prior to setting up Loud, I've worked 7 years in the micromobility sector. So coming from the private sector, but working with the public sector, with the third sector, I've seen firsthand that these are the spaces where there's cross-sector collaboration. That's where the greatest impact is made. And I've seen that time and time again. So when I stepped out of my role working in a micromobility operator, that's what I was discussing with my network. You know, we have to see more of this cross-sector collaboration if we are going to get to this end goal, to this vision of system change, to this way of moving that's much more equitable and enjoyable for a much larger set of people. So on to the next slide. Again, just a little bit about our methods and kind of how that's structured in Loud Mobility, which will carry over into some of the kind of recommendations or themes that we'll discuss today. So we're really built upon these 4 values that we'll go through in this talk, which is people taking human-centered approaches, places, really thinking about the types of places that we want to be, live, work, how we show up in them, how we feel safe in them, and making sure that we leave places better than we found them, which nicely leads into planet, improving environment, of course, but, essentially harking back, there is no planet B. So this is absolutely should be a critical for any organization that's newly setting up currently. And play. And this is a really important value for us. It's one of the key things that was a real driving force in setting up Loud Mobility, because in looking at these cross-sector projects that we needed to happen, in thinking about how do we get to that point of system change and improving journeys for people, a lot of the discussions came around this point that we've been focusing on the bare minimum for too long. We've been talking about safety as if it's the holy grail and the high standard that everybody should be safe or have the equal amount of safety when moving around their homes, their places of work, their communities. But that's a bare minimum. Safety is a basic right that people have. It's not something that we should be striving to achieve in specific groups. In fact, what we should be striving to achieve is good journeys, positive journeys, joyful journeys. And so we really are quite serious about this value of play and making sure that we're not just looking at the bare minimum and having this low standard of, is it possible and would you, not die or not be injured? Those are pretty basic things. We want you to be able to get a journey, no matter who you are, what your background is, what your mobility needs are, to have the option to have a joyful, sustainable journey. And I think that's the standard that we need to start talking about in the industry. And so we take those values and we have kind of three parts to the organization. One is professional services, project delivery. It's really helping cross-sector projects to happen. Somebody else might have an absolutely fantastic idea, but maybe doesn't have certain skill sets or connections or links or even time and capacity, because we've just seen that a lot of organizations don't get into this space because it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of doing, you have to invest in it. And so that's where we'll step in and support to make those projects happen, to deliver them and to get those end results of those benefits that we want to achieve. And then on the other side, again, speaking to this kind of loud in raising the number, loud in raising the volume, we have the community and culture side. Now there's a facing outwards into the public community and culture side where we're launching campaigns. We have a very exciting campaign that I'll mention. And putting content out there, speaking positively about sustainable transport in a way that is accessible for people. We don't need to use complex jargon. We can make it easy for people to understand and access, and of course make it fun. But there's also an internal to the transport sector and the sustainable transport space aspect to this community and culture change. Now this is about creating environments where people can have conversations about ideas, change making ideas, thinking outside of the box, challenging the status quo, and making it easier for more ideas to come into this space, whether they're part of what we assume is the majority or the minority or whatever. We need more people involved and represented and participating in the industry as well if we ever want to get to our end. I think what we're all here for, that zero carbon commute and further. And then these ladder up into our kind of big ideas. So this is your research projects, much longer term, really looking to affect that system change. So here we're targeting more on the policy level, on legislation, and running maybe 2 to 5 year projects in research that are really going to help us move the sector into the right direction. So hopefully that sets up a little bit about kind of where I'm coming from, and what Loud Mobility is all about, because it will probably be a first introduction for many on here. And then just onto the next slide, it's just highlighting in each of those three areas some of the work that we've done over the past year, and in each of those sectors. So on the professional services, working with other people who are doing awesome things, we help deliver the World Bicycle Relief's charity partnership with the Cycling World Championships. So again, very cross sector. You had every cycling brand under the sun, all the cycling federation sports. It really turned me into a cycling fan. It was palpable in Glasgow, a sports cycling fan, because I'm of course a cycling fan. But we help them to deliver that project, and we're really focused on supporting delivery of those benefits and utilizing the values that we've spoken to. She's Electric has been largely digital, but is now moving into the physical, and this is a campaign that's all about getting more women on e-cycles. We are role modeling real women with real e-cycles, all types of backgrounds, all types of body shapes, all types of mobility needs. This is a campaign that's really about saying e-cycles are for all women. They are not a toy they're not a boy toy or a cool piece of tech. They can be, but they don't have to be. They're not, you can only use this particular type of e-cargo bike if you're a mum and you need to go to the shops. It includes that option, but you can also use an EMTB and go into the mountains and have the time of your life. So we want to really expand the way that we're talking about women on e-cycles and actually lowering the barriers again, and just creating a bunch of opportunities all around the country. So it's going into the physical next year, and into festivals, to just give people the chance to try it. And again, that's a really important factor in behavior change, is making it easy. And sometimes we think we're making it easy, but actually we might not be making it that easy. I had a really good conversation with someone this week actually about cycle training. Now, it's a fantastic thing that local authorities around the UK all invest into cycle training, free cycle training. You can go and access it in your local park. These are fantastic things. However, I have personal experience of people in my life, my neighbour, my mother, other friends, even an employee of Loud, who don't know how to cycle, and going into a local park, not knowing what they're setting themselves up for, and signing up, whether it's free or not, to do that on a day is a barrier. And what really worked for each of these people was going to where they were. So with my neighbour, she won't mind me saying, my neighbour has suffered with long COVID, and has been really housebound because she also has an autistic daughter who needs a lot of care and doesn't leave the house much. And I was outside, I happened to be outside her house with an e-bike and with the time to just sit outside our front doors and have a chat about it. And we went to play out together, which was fantastic. Went out to our local recreation ground and just had a whiz around the park. Now, that was an opportunity. And we've been talking ever since about what e-cycle she could try next. With my mother, I set up, at the time I was part of the, in fact, still am, trustee at the Women of Colour Cycling Collective, and reached out in that network for a cycling instructor that looked like my mum, that was about the same age, that met us in our local park. I went along with her, I loaned her my bike, and we just talked it all through and had a little try before she went to the local authority cycle training. So it's really just challenging. And I'm dipping into some of the content because this conversation came up, and I think it's so key that we keep questioning, are we actually making it easy, or are we kind of resting on, this is what we've done, this is what we've always done, we get X amount of data, it feels like we're doing a good thing, and therefore it's enough. Of course, it's a good thing to offer cycle training for free to your constituents, to your community members, to your organization and your employees if you can. But it might not be the thing that is really actually going to change their behavior. And so what we've seen with the She's Electric campaign, we ran some smaller scale actually events with quite a number of local authority partners, Kent, Thanet, so shout out to them for supporting really early on, as well as a bunch of different brands that offered the e-cycles. But it was going in certain times of the day where women were in the park with their kids, we had a place that they could sit down, we had stuff for them to play with, and we created an environment that was easygoing and met them where they were. So this is the campaigns and culture side, and just continuing to question, are there more things that we can do to just make it easier for people, more fun for people? And then these are laddering up into that big ideas. So we're working on the community cycles project. So I would spend another hour on this slide if I went into too much detail here, but we're working with TRL to essentially evidence the impact of community cycling projects and create the case for them to be supported and considered as a key intervention in sustainable transport plans across the UK. So I will leave it there. Moving on to the next slide, we're going to kind of get into the recommendations and those values. So I would bet a considerable amount of money that during today's event or throughout the event, and I don't say this to call anyone out, but I'm sure it's been said, and I'm sure it will be said time and time and time again. It will be multiple times that we'll have this conversation of, do we need more carrots? Do we need more sticks? It's got nothing to do with carrots and sticks, frankly. We are talking about people, and we need to start approaching this conversation in that way. You know, taking into account this is the human-centered approach. People are complex. A lot of them don't even like carrots, so I'm just putting that out there. We just cannot connect to what is really important to people when we're using analogies that take them for a donkey, essentially. For me, it feels disrespectful. It really does. And I had a really good chat with someone again just yesterday about like this idea of using sticks on people. I mean, for me, that I feel deeply uncomfortable with those connotations. So can we please collectively agree that we're leaving this one behind us, and we're going to start talking about people, and we're going to start talking about people with a respect for different experience and different opinion and background. And this idea of, you know, do you give them a carrot or a stick? It's degrading, and we just don't need it. You know, we're adults here. We can talk about people. We can be much more, let's say, open to understanding that it's not going to be. We all know. We all talk about it all the time. It's not a silver bullet either way. We don't have a carrot or a stick. That is not the way that we do this. So it's the wrong analogy, and I reckon we should collectively agree, if we can. I should have done a poll on this. Hope maybe it's not too late. Maybe you can just put in the chat and we can talk about it at some point. But can we please collectively agree to put this one in the bin? Because it doesn't work. So speaking more about people, we'll go to the next slide. I think, you know, coming back to this idea of how to increase behavior change, how to take that benefits approach to it in your organization or in a large organization. What matters to your people? Ask them. You know, if you, again, move away from that analogy, you don't say, what carrots would you like? What sticks would you like? You say, what matters to you? And so with the She's Electric campaign, our people are women. In these partnerships we've entered with local authorities, most were particularly interested in women and women who were caregivers and parents. So that's why we set about making it as easy as possible to connect with them where they were already going, and making it easy for them to say, okay, I'm happy to be here with my kids. It's easy to be here with my kids, and give them those opportunities. And then we asked them what they cared about, what they struggled with, what they wanted. And we didn't make it about measuring them or making a judgment or, you know, we need to capture this data. It was conversational from a place of genuine interest. And approaching it that way, we found things that we weren't expecting to. We took this qualitative approach. And this was, you know, really about being, you know, even 10% of the women being ready to buy an e-cycle. We weren't expecting to find that. It looks like I have really powered through my time. So I'm going to pass over to Mark Hand, I believe, and then hopefully I'll be able to come back at some point and cover off the 3 other aspects of this approach. Clearly, there's so much more to say. So thank you for having me on, and over to you, Mark.
That's absolutely brilliant. And yes, Georgia will be back with us on the panel shortly.